black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know. I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zio!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you this evening. How's everyone doing? Thank you so much for being here on a Sunday evening and taking the time to listen to the show. I really do appreciate it. Going to be talking to Matt tonight. And Matt had actually run into a red glowing ball of light. And so oftentimes on the show, I'll bring people on that have seen these lights in the woods, and there's really no answer for it. But it's fascinating to hear people talk about it, and I've encountered the lights myself. So Matt will be coming on talking about that light he had seen and how it reacted when they started showing interest in it. And then we'll be talking to Jason, who's down there in California. And Jason has 2 encounters he wants to share tonight. And one of his encounters reminded me of a Monster Quest episode. It's very similar to what happened to Jason that night. Take a listen.
I thought it was a myth, or I had no belief in any of that at all. That night made me a believer.
For outdoorsman Ted Story, myth became reality after a violent encounter one night while sleeping in his motor home in the middle of Vancouver Island.
All of a sudden, the motorhome shook violently. It listed 30 degrees or so. I would anticipate that the tires just about came off the ground.
Startled, Ted realized something very large was rocking the motorhome, and it was standing right outside the window.
I can see the spectrum of this creature, and it was standing on 2 legs for sure, and it had two upper limbs, and it was extremely hairy, matted hair.
Ted jumped to his feet and ran outside without thinking.
The smell in the air was a very stenchy, strong, almost dead fish, but musky. It was very, very prominent. I got to the tree line where the firelight had stopped. So basically it was where I was looking into blackness and I'm lit up. That's when I could hear the footsteps of this creature stop as it knew I was there. It was very still and very quiet and very eerie, knowing that something's right there or somewhere close by looking at me. Then I thought about how crazy I was after I'd gotten out. I was like, I have no way to defend myself.
Ted retreated inside the mobile home without seeing the creature again. The experience left him shaken.
I'll never camp there again unless I'm in a motorhome. I will never sleep in a tent in Strathcona Park as long as I live.
I don't blame the guy. I wouldn't either. But you hear many accounts like this. I've heard many off there, people in trailers where something picks it up and drops it. I mean, a trailer, there's no way a man could pick up and drop. but you hear many accounts like this. So Jason will go into some of that tonight, talk about his 2 encounters. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member, get additional shows. If you get a chance, check it out. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Jason to the show. Jason, thanks for coming on.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much for being here. And I know you had 2 encounters down there in California. If you would you kind of start from the very beginning? Tell us about this trailer incident.
Sure. The first one was when I was 12 years old. It was in 1984. I was in the Kings Canyon National Forest. I wish I could remember closer where we were, but I was just too young. I don't remember. But me and my dad and 2 of my uncles were up deer hunting. We hunted all day and then went to sleep. And one of my uncles owned an old camper. It just held like 4 bunks. It was a real basic one, an old one. Somewhere in the middle of the night, like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, something lifted the back end of that trailer up. I'm estimating maybe a foot or 2 off the ground and just dropped it and jolted us out of bed. And the first thing that came into my mind, what could that be? Everybody jumped up. One of my uncles grabbed his rifle and went to run out. And my dad grabbed him and pulled him back. And he said, "No, you're not going outside." And, they had a little bit of an argument. And my dad, being the older brother, he kind of just put him down. He said, "That's it. We're going back to bed." I asked him, I said, "Well, what was that? What could do that?" And he goes, "Oh, it was just a bear." I could hear it moving around outside, and it was knocking things over. My dad had one of those old 5-gallon got coolers. He kept drinks and stuff in. He knocked that over and some other stuff he had. And then I didn't hear anything. And I didn't sleep the rest of the night. And I was thinking Sasquatch, but I didn't say it. And my dad acted so weird about it and wouldn't let anybody out. It was weird. It was weird because it's out of character for him to be like that. If he thought that was people outside, he would have charged right out the door with his rifle. I know him, and
yeah, it's very, very
he was
strange.
Spooked, I could tell. Like, he knew something I didn't. I was just a kid, even though I had my own thoughts,
And from our conversations, your dad seemed like the type of guy you probably didn't want to mess with him. And just from the short conversations you and I have had, Jason, he seems like the type of guy that probably wasn't afraid of much, or nothing much frightened this man.
Yeah, he's an honor guy, man. He spent a lot of time up in the mountains, and he's a hunter and a fisherman, and he spent almost every weekend up there as I was growing up cutting firewood. He sold for extra money, so he was up there constantly.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder because of his reaction to it. I always wonder in situations like this, how much does this guy know? Because your normal guy reaction is, I'm going to grab my rifle, I'm going to walk outside, and if you mess with me, I'm going to blow your head off, especially after something like that, which makes no sense because the bears don't pick up campers and drop them, lift them up.
Well, right.
Yeah. Well, how far did it lift you up? Was it like 2 feet?
I think it had to be a foot or 2. It was a good drop. It really jolted me out of bed when it dropped, man. It was crazy. I've never experienced anything like that. I wish that thing would have had windows, but it was just an old tin box, It was an old school hunting trailer from like the 50s or something. So I didn't get a look at anything. All I know is something really strong picked that thing up, because with the 4 of us in it, and it not being the type of like lightweight material they make trailers out of these days,
yeah,
it had to be close to 2,000 pounds, and it just jerked it right up off the ground, no problem,
Yeah, you're right. Those old trailers really are heavy. I mean, they're like tanks. Even the new ones that are tin cans, man, are heavy. And you and I both know bears don't pick up trailers and drop them. Even if there's no explanation for a bear. You know what I mean?
It was still hooked up to my uncle's pickup. So he got to the back end and just lifted it straight off the ground. I mean, that's pretty crazy. I don't know what else could do it, you know?
Yeah, and your encounter reminded me of that Monster Quest episode I played at the very beginning of the show, and they do that. I don't know why. I don't know if it must be a territorial thing. It must be just a way of screwing with you. Hey, everyone, wake up. It makes you wonder that type of behavior. If it's territorial, you'd think they would attack, but they don't. They just pick up trailers and drop them, or they'll come up and rock trailers. Very odd, very strange.
Yeah, I have no clue except for maybe just not happy with it through there, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Maybe try to spook you and get you to leave.
Yeah.
Made me want to leave.
Yeah, I bet. It would be enough to make me want to leave. But tell us about your second. So that was pretty much it for the night, correct? Nothing else happened?
Yeah, nothing else happened. It was just a really strange deal, and nobody ever talked about it again, you know?
Yeah, that seems to happen a lot.
It was just odd. I had an odd feeling about the whole thing, the way my dad reacted and stuff, and it's like they knew something I didn't, you know?
Yeah, I think he knew it wasn't a bear, but he didn't want to say what he thought it was. I mean, that's my own personal opinion listening to it, because I can put myself in his shoes. And, you know, you say, well, it was a bear to get everyone to kind of calm down and relax. And, but, you know, probably deep down, he knew it wasn't a bear. So
yeah,
I was curious though about your second encounter. If you would kind of just walk us into that. Where you guys, was it still California?
Yeah. We were cutting wood up. It was closer to Yosemite National Park, not far from a place called Mammoth Pools. We'd go up for the weekend and we'd cut wood all day Saturday, and then we'd camp, and then Sunday morning we'd get up and fish for some trout for a few hours and then go home. And we got in the habit of doing that for a while. We'd woke up that Sunday morning. I know it was in May because it was just after the thaw of all the snow up there. They just opened up all the smaller roads and stuff because they closed them down for the winter. And there was still a lot of ice and stuff on the ground. And I just remember I was freezing, and I was 16 by that time. So we're talking 1988 or so. I just remember I'd thrown my line in the water, and I didn't care if I caught anything because I really just wanted to get out of there. I was cold and I was hungry. But my dad caught a fish, and he was getting it off the line, and I was dragging my line in, and I was just kind of looking around, and across this little stream, I'm guessing it was about 75 feet away. There was this big log on the ground, this old dead tree, and it was kind of hollowed out on one end. And all of a sudden, I just noticed there was a Sasquatch laying there on the ground. He was laying on his stomach with like his forearms tucked up underneath him, and his head was just tilted, and he was just staring at us. And I mean, I was just in shock. I couldn't believe what I was looking at, you know. And my dad was fooling with that fish he just caught, and he was just a couple feet from me. I reached over and I grabbed him, and I said, "Hey," I said, 1 o'clock over across the stream by a big log. And I know I said it real quiet because I was scared, and he couldn't hear me. He's all grumpy, what? And then like it set into him what I said. So he looked up and he saw it too, and he just kind of froze. And then he had his 30-06 rifle leaned up against a tree right by him, and he looked down at it, and he like put his hand out like he was going to grab it, but then he didn't. He just sat there. And I'm not sure how long we looked at it. It was probably just a few seconds, but it felt like forever. But all of a sudden, from behind us, the little road was right behind us. And from back behind there, I heard what sounded like a line drive off of a baseball bat, like a real sharp line drive, which I'm guessing was a tree knot. And we both looked back when we heard it, because it was really loud. And then as quick as I turned back to look at it, and it jumped over the log. He like planted his hand and jumped over it and ran across the stream. And the stream was probably 25 feet wide, maybe 30. And he cleared it in 3 steps. And then he hit the road, and boom, he was across into the trees on the other side of the road, and he was gone. But it was crazy. He was so fast.
Yeah, it sounds like it, especially your dad seeing it. And, you know, I don't want to come back to this because I would start having a lot of questions for your dad. But my question to you is, let's say the term Sasquatch doesn't exist or Bigfoot doesn't exist. No one knows what you're talking about. How would you describe to someone what you saw as far as the face and what you actually saw? How would you, can you describe for us what you actually saw?
He was very tall. I'm guessing between 7 and 8 feet. I'm not exactly sure. I think I put an email I wrote to you. I saw Andre the Giant at wrestling like a year before that, and that guy was the only thing I could ever compare to the height I saw in this thing. I mean, because it was unbelievably tall. And he didn't look like some of the other ones I've seen, like the Patty on the Gimlin film, or the way people describe him on your show as being like real super muscular. He was very thin. He didn't have big muscles or anything. His hair wasn't thick. It was more sparse, and was probably 3 or 4 inches long. He was like, I don't know if he was gray or like he was like white but really dirty, but it was like a grayish looking color. And I don't know if he was skin? Old or...
When you say...
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I apologize. When you say grayish, do you mean his skin or his hair?
Oh, no, the hair. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
The skin was kind of gray too, but darker than the hair. He was different looking, though. His nose was very wide and kind of flat, but it had kind of a sharp bridge. And the eyes were pretty deep set, and he had a pretty heavy ridge right across above his eyes. And then his forehead was pretty tall, but it was weird. The hair kind of like almost parted in the middle and like come across, and he just looked different. I'm not sure quite how to describe him. He's not like anything I've seen online or heard anybody describe, really.
Would you say he looked more like a man or more like an ape?
He didn't, I guess, more man-ish, but it's hard to describe because he didn't look, I don't know, like some kind of weird mix, I guess. The nose made him look so much more different. You know, it was so flat and big. Like, I mean, his nose must have been 4 inches across, and I couldn't see his nostrils. I'm assuming that they were like underneath where the angle it was at. I couldn't see him, but it was just weird looking. I'm not quite sure how to describe it better than that.
No, you're doing a great job. Did he, did the expression on his face change at all when you were looking at him?
You know what? His eyes are what stood out to me. I mean, he looked super angry when I first noticed him, because like it was just super quiet. I don't even remember hearing birds chirping or anything. I mean, it was just after sunup, and I just kind of noticed them, and the eyes are what caught my attention first. They're big and like chocolate brown and look super mean. Like that guy in your intro who says like how hateful his eyes look.
Right.
Yeah. I totally relate with that guy. It looked evil. I mean, he looked so angry. I can only assume they're upset we were there, you know. But I don't remember the face changing the expression or anything. It's just we heard that crack behind us, and then like I glimpsed away for just a minute, and boom, he was going over that log, and he was gone. And I don't recall like an expression on his face.
Yeah, I understand. It's interesting that whole how you describe how it happened, because you hear that a lot. You know, they seem to one will kind of draw your attention over here while the other one gets away, and I've heard that. I mean, I've even experienced that firsthand. I've talked about it on many shows, but where they will try and draw your attention over here while the other guy gets away. It really fascinates me because you don't see a lot of that behavior in animals. You see that more in humans than you do in animals. They're not like, hey, I'm dancing over here so my buddy can get away. You just don't see normally animals do that. Humans will, though.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't think this is a normal animal for sure. I mean, an ape would be the closest thing, I guess, but
yeah,
this is nothing like an ape. This is more. This is something more, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So it takes off. Did you and your dad talk about it at all?
Well, it all happened really fast, and then after he was gone, he looked at me and he goes, "Grab your stuff, let's go." And so I just grabbed my pole, and he grabbed his and his tackle box and his gun. And it's funny because he's like all meticulous always. He would, you know, take apart his pole and put it back in a little case and all that. Man, he checked everything in that truck, and we were out of there. And I told him, I said, that was a Sasquatch, wasn't it? And he just looked at me and nodded his head. And he wouldn't talk about it, though. He wouldn't talk about it at all, which made me crazy because all I wanted to do was talk to him about it. And he just told me, he said, "Look," he said, "what you saw here today, you don't ever tell anyone, ever. Not your mom, not your sister, not your best friend, nobody." He said, "You tell anybody about this, before you know it, everybody's going to know, and everybody's going to think you're completely nuts." He goes, "This kind of stuff can ruin your life." And he never, again, did we ever even bring it up, because he made it plain. He did not want to talk about it.
Yeah, it really makes me wonder what your dad knew. Because, you know, normally a reaction like that is a guy who's seen it before. You know what I mean? That is a guy who I can tell you from, I'll be your expert witness. Your dad had seen it before, because your normal reaction is not that. I promise you your dad had seen it before. I promise you. Because that's how people react when they've seen these things. I mean, I know your dad's gone and rest in peace and everything, but your dad has seen it before. I promise you your dad has seen it before and probably dealt with them firsthand.
Now that, you know, I'm 46 years old now, and I've had lots of time to think about this over the years, and I really believe he I don't know how many times he's seen it, but he spent so much time up through the mountains all around there, that the way he acted, and, you know, he was kind of an eccentric guy. He liked to tell big stories. He had some whoppers he used to like to tell his friends and stuff. But that was one thing that he would never talk about, ever. And which I find ironic, because he loved to tell these crazy stories, you know? But he was having none of that. That was something that you did not talk about, period.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm pretty sure Dad had dealt with this before, and I could be wrong, but I have, just from interviewing people for so long and hearing, you know, what you're telling me, I really think your dad had seen it before. He'd probably dealt with this firsthand. I wanted to ask you, what do you think that Sasquatch is? What's your honest opinion? I know you kind of touched on it earlier, but what do you think that these things are?
I believe it's an animal, but it's something, I don't know if you want to call it the missing link or what you want to call it, but it's not full animal and it's not man. It's somewhere in the middle. You know, I've heard, you know, on your show a lot of talk about maybe it's paranormal somehow, or I don't know about any of that. I mean, and I saw it for not long at all. But, I mean, it appeared to be an animal to me.
Yeah, a very odd animal.
But it's just so much more, which is what's kind of confounding to me. And it frustrates me when I think about it. I don't know what it was, but to this day, it's been 30 years, and it still scares me, man. I mean, I took my wife up to the mountains during the day last year and drove way up high in the mountains. And even in the daylight, we got out a little scenic overlook so she could take some selfies and all that. And I was kind of nervous, man. I never went camping again after that. And, we stopped that. I told him I didn't want to go back up and spend the night. We go up and cut wood during the day, but I don't want to stay out at night because I was scared to death that thing was coming back.
I understand where you're coming from. I think that a lot of times in situation, it's strange, I agree with you. They're an animal, but there is something, like you said, there's something very different about it. It doesn't feel like something. I mean, you got a really good look at this thing. Don't you feel like something doesn't add up here? Like something isn't right. I don't know that, when people run into them and they have daytime encounters, that they compare it to a monkey or an ape. I think we do that because it's the only thing that makes sense to us in our head. But when you really start asking someone, what do you think it was? They'll normally say animal, but they'll say there's something very wrong about it. There's something very different about it. Something does not quite add up here. Because there was
definitely got a human-like quality to it somehow.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where I'm going with it.
I think that's what makes it so creepy,
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you, Jason. I really do. I think that I think in your second encounter, it got caught. It was watching you guys, and it got caught. That's the part that makes most people very uncomfortable, because here you are watching this thing. You got one behind you that's banging on a tree. How many more are around you guys? You know what I mean?
I have no idea. That freaks me out to think about that. What could have happened? I have no idea. These things are monstrous. I don't, and that's something I'd thought of in the past. I used to listen to Art Bell all the time. I love that little tribute you guys did to him. But they did a big show about people going missing in national parks quite a few years ago. And I've thought a lot about it, that these people who just disappeared, that without a trace, they never found a body, they never found bones. And I'm talking thousands of people in national parks in this country have just completely disappeared. And they have no idea why, but they hide it. And I know whoever it was who was getting interviewed on Coast to Coast had tried to get statistics and stuff from the government, and they just shut them down. Yeah. I can't help but think that maybe some people have been taken. I know it sounds crazy, but I
don't think it's crazy as you think. I tend to agree with you. I think a lot of people have been taken. I think a lot of people have been eaten and killed, and it just kind of gets swept under the rug. You know what I mean? It's don't look too closely at this situation. And I can give you example after example after example of very strange, odd deaths and very strange, odd missing people that should have never come up missing.
It's just odd that so many people have disappeared and nobody wants to talk about it. Yet we have all these sightings, not just here, but all over the world. And nobody wants to acknowledge there might be a connection,
Yeah, well, I think there is definitely a connection between missing people and Sasquatch, but no one really wants to seem to address it. But you're right. I think there is definitely a connection. And it makes you wonder, too, because more and more people are seeing it. Is it becoming more socially acceptable to talk about it, or are their numbers increasing? It's hard to say. It's a mystery.
Well, after I talked to you earlier, I've never told this story at all to anyone. Not my wife, not my best friend. No one. I listened to my dad when he told me never to talk about it. And after I got that call from you, I had to explain to my wife. She sat next to me what's going on, And so I told her the story, and that's one of the things that really makes me think that my dad had seen things a long time before I ever did, was that, I mean, we're talking back in the mid-'70s. Whenever anything Sasquatch related was on TV, he was watching it. The old In Search Of. Until I started listening to your show, I had no idea anybody knew about that old show. I'm amazed that anybody remembers that. But I was like 4 or 5 years old when that thing was on, and it scared me to death. But he'd watch all this stuff. He drug me to Harry and the Hendersons when that came out later on, you know, and that goofy. But, like, he never talked about anything, but obviously he was fascinated by this, you know?
Yeah, he had an interest in it. Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I got off track. I was telling my wife is people just didn't talk about that stuff when I was a kid. I mean, I don't know when I first saw the Patterson-Gimlin film, but it wasn't until later, and I never heard anybody talk about that. Back in those days, it just wasn't talked about. Now, I think the internet's what's changed everything. People feel more safe to share what they've actually seen. That and all the different TV shows and stuff that are on.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of the answer. But I think the other thing, too, is you'll find a lot of police officers that'll come forward. You'll find, and not that a police officer is any more credible than anyone else, but I guess in the general public's eyes, it seems more credible. But, you know, you'll have police officers come forward. You'll have ambulance drivers come forward. You have doctors come forward. You have judges come forward. The idea that the only people who see Bigfoot are toothless hillbillies living up in the woods is wrong, because everyone from all walks of life see this thing. And it's really hard to wrap your head around what it is or what's going on, and why are more people seeing this thing, because it sure seems like a lot more people are starting to see this thing and take notice of this thing out there. And that's the other thing, too. It's not just the United States. I mean, you're talking Canada, parts of Mexico, China, Australia's huge, man. They got the Yowie out there. Russia has the, what are they calling? The Almas. And so it's like and it really makes you wonder, why has no one caught up with this thing? I don't understand why no one has caught up with this thing. Or maybe they have, and it's being shut down. You know what I mean?
I'm sorry to ask out of turn, and you can tell me my own business if you don't want to, but I think about, like, when I listen to your show about the Browns place, where they've got them there all the time, or what's the guy's name down in Texas, down there in the big thicket and all that?
Bob Garrett.
Like, these people know where they are. Or that lady a few days ago who had them living on her property too. Gosh, I forgot her name. I'm sorry.
Connie.
Connie. And they're there. So if someone really wants to, we could, right?
You would think so. Yeah. I'm with you.
I mean, I know you saw some stuff because I remember listening to you, especially after you were down there in Texas, you know. I was nervous listening to that, man. It's weird how, like, you know, I don't know anything about a dog man or any of that stuff or the kind of stuff that was running around there, but that sounded like a zoo out there that you were in the middle of. And, like, I was nervous just listening to it. And I'm like, well, you know what? If people know where these things are, how come we can't get something official together and just do it, you know?
Yeah, it'd be nice to get to that point. And going back to what you just said, yeah, Texas is no joke, man. There's some real stuff going on. There's some real stuff going on down there. But, yeah, you would think we'd be able to solve it. You'd think it seems odd to me that we haven't. The subject hasn't really moved forward that much since the Patterson-Gimlin film, really. Just more people are willing to talk about it. I'd say other than that, not much has changed. But it would be nice to catch up with this thing and really track it down and solve this mystery.
There's got to be some badass commando kind of dudes who aren't scared to go out there. I mean, it ain't going to be me because there's a lot of things in this world that don't scare me. I'm a big dude. But I don't want any part of those things. But there's got to be some crazy people who, you know, military type training kind of guys who could really do it, you know? And I'm like, man, somebody should do it because like all them calls from the Browns place that you played on the show, I was like, whoa, man, those are real. I'm a skeptical guy about some things. I'm open-minded, but I'm skeptical because I know a lot of people just want attention or whatever. They have their own motives for making stuff up sometimes.
You would be surprised. You would be surprised, Jason. You would be surprised. I know a lot of people. I mean, I've been accused of what's one of the things they say online? Oh, I have paid actors on the show. I'm like, well, if I had paid, trust me, it'd be a better show if I had paid actors on the show. But I would say most people generally don't want to come forward. I mean, just like you didn't really want to come on the show. Mm-hmm. Most people really don't want to come on the show. Most people don't really. And so I think in situations, you got to take someone at their word. I can tell you the Browns had some real stuff going on their property. That place was no joke either.
Man, when I heard those calls and stuff, I mean, you could just hear the difference between something that's real and something that's not. That was like a real deal. I was like, my heart was pounding when I listened to that. And I mean, I kept backing that up and listening to it over and over again. I was like, man, this is it. This is it. They got him there, you know?
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, you show up at the Browns property, and John will actually hand you a AK-47 to walk around when. So you know right there he's not. There's no one out there doing calls. There's no one out there running to. If he's going to hand you a loaded rifle and say, "Let's go for a walk," this man has stuff going on his property, real stuff going on his property. And I heard it daytime. I mean, Sarah has hours and hours and hours and hours of recorded audio, but when I was there, you would hear him during the daytime. First time I ever heard Yahoo, and it was not from a human. And I heard this Yahoo, and it wasn't just me. It was me, Woody, Sarah, and a couple other people. And I kind of turned to everyone. I was like, "Is it just me, or did you guys just hear Yahoo?" And everyone's eyes were about the size of saucers. And so I was like, "Well, I guess that answered my question." But that place is no joke, man. There's a lot of stuff that goes on out there, and it would be so nice to solve this and just be done with it. You know what I mean?
I kind of feel like it is because I know some of it real like that, you know, or in Texas or in several places that you've uncovered just talking to people, you know. And I know you're not the only one. I don't know, maybe the whole government thing, the men in black and the biker dude and all that. I don't know if that stuff's true, but it would not surprise me one bit that the government does not want any of this talked about, you know.
And it makes you wonder why. If it's nothing more than just an animal, undiscovered animal, there should be no problems with it, right?
Yeah, but there's definitely not just an animal. I mean, 100%. It's not. I fight with myself, man, because I'm like, it is an animal. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. You know?
Yeah, I hear you.
Because I don't know how to put my finger on it. It's a big, scary damn thing, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't hear anything. It didn't make any noises. I didn't smell anything. There was a lot of things that you hear a lot that I didn't see. It all just happened so fast, too. I mean, I tried to remember everything I could, but
yeah, I understand.
I don't have an explanation for it. I'm like frustrated. I don't know how to express it, but any better now. It frustrates me because I don't know exactly what I saw.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get mad because people on the show, they're like, "I don't know what it was with," and I'm like, "Yes, you do. It was Sasquatch." But you know, me myself, I'm like, "Yeah, it's Sasquatch, but what the hell is it?" You know.
It is kind of funny sometimes when you talk to people, but it's one of those situations where when you run into this thing, all of a sudden you got a million questions. You know what I mean? And realistically, about 30 of your questions could be answered. The rest is who knows. So it is frustrating.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Nobody really knows. And I mean, there's a million experts out there, and I've never wanted to delve into all this internet community and stuff because I know I would just get pissed. People on the internet already annoy me, and I know everybody out there is an expert, and I don't know anything, and people say I'm full of it, and I don't know anything, and I agree, I don't know anything, but I'm not full of it. I know what I saw, and I don't care what anybody says, and I don't have anything to gain from it, and honestly, I mean, it was embarrassing for me to come on here and say it. I have such a stigma attached to it, and mostly because of the things my dad told me. You know, he really put fear in God in me over it, you know?
Yeah, well, I think it does do good. I think that, it's funny because when one witness starts talking, all of a sudden everyone will start talking. And there's a lot of people who I've had on the show who said I would never share this with anyone because of the stigma behind it. But you sure seem to, week after week after week of these people come on and share it. And I felt like maybe I should share what I saw. And so I think it does do some good to come on and talk about it. I really do. If I didn't think this was doing any good, I wouldn't do it anymore. Trust me, I wouldn't do it anymore.
I didn't tell you this, but you want to know because I have been thinking for at least 3 years about writing to you and telling you what I saw, and I just haven't did. I haven't pulled the trigger, and I always think I'm going to do it, and I wouldn't do it. Yesterday morning, I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, right? And he was interviewing Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, and he gets far out into a lot of stuff. But he brought up his the show he did a few years ago, Joe Rogan Questions Everything, I think it was the show. And they went out. Him and his comedian friend went out into the woods somewhere with some supposed experts or whatever, and tree knocking and all that crap. And I remember I watched it at the time because I've listened to him for years. But, he was obviously with some idiots who don't really know anything. And after I listened to that show, I sent him a message on Twitter, man. I told him, I said, you know what? You did one show with people who had no idea what they were talking about, and they're goofy people. I said, why don't you do a podcast with someone who really knows some stuff? And I mentioned you and Bob Gimlin, and I hope to God that he sees that and is like, maybe I should, because I would love for you guys to be on there with him.
Yeah, it's
he totally discounted it, man. He's like, yeah, have a Gigantopithecus, so we know that a long time ago, that it actually walked the earth, but today, no, there's nothing out there. And yeah. I'm like, I got so mad because he completely discounted it. And next thing I know, took my break and I fired off that email to you. That's what finally triggered me, is I got mad.
Yeah. Well, I'm honored that you'd come on and share it, and thank you so much for the kind words. I'll have to tell my Joe Rogan's. I met Joe Rogan one time in Vegas, and I'll save that for another day. But thank you so much for the kind words and for doing that. And again, I'm honored you'd come on the show and share it. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, no problem. I appreciate what you do. And it really does mean a lot to a lot of people. I don't care what the internet idiots say. They can say whatever they want. I know the real thing when I hear it and see it. You're a sincere guy. I mean, I've been listening to you for, 4 years now at least. There's not a bit of dishonesty in you. If I thought there was, I would not be listening, and I sure wouldn't be calling. So I hope you're doing some good. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, brother. Thank you again for coming on.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Well, next up on the show, I want to welcome Matt. Matt, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Wes.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And I know you had started seeing things in the past when you were hunting that may directly relate to Sasquatch, at least things people have said on the show. But you ran into this strange light, and I really want to talk about that. Now, all of this took place in Ohio, correct?
Yeah, southern Ohio.
Southern Ohio. If you would you kind of walk us into this light encounter, and then we can talk about some of these other things? Sure.
The light encounter happened back in November of 1995. I grew up down in southern Ohio, and I've hunted since I've been just a little boy. My dad took me out a lot, and once I could drive myself and everything else, hunted and hunted with buddies and everything. So I had started a job in late 1994, and I became friends with a guy who loved to coon hunt. And if nobody knows about coon hunting, they use dogs to coon hunt. And what will happen, you go at night, and usually there's flashlights, or a lot of guys will wear, at that time, lights on their hats, and you go out, you turn the dog loose, and the dog will get on the track, and the raccoons will usually go up a tree, and the dogs will be at the tree barking, and you follow the sound of your dog, and you put the light up in the tree, you see the raccoon, see the eyes, you shoot it out of the tree, and that's how you get them. And what he did is he loved running these dogs, and then he also, once he would harvest the raccoons, he would skin them out and then sell the hides. So we became friends, and I remember him asking me if I'd ever been coon hunting before, and I had. I had some other friends who were into that, and I'd been out some. And he said, "Do you have any places we could go?" I'm like, "Yeah." I actually had, it was a huge farm I had permission to hunt about 10 miles from where I grew up. And so I knew the area really well. And I'd been in there bow hunting for deer and squirrel hunting. So he said, "Well, let's get together once the season opens, and we'll go." And I said, "All right." So the season opened first part of November, and at this point it was 1995. And we worked about an hour north of where this farm was. So one Friday after work, we got together, and he took one of his dogs. I took a .22, and I didn't have any hat with a light or anything, so I just had a flashlight. Of course, he had his stuff, and so he put his dog box in the back of my truck, because I had a big four-wheel drive, and loaded his dog up, and we started heading south. So probably around 10 o'clock, we get down to this farm. Now, this farm, it's at the pretty much a dead-end road, but it's several hundred acres, and that property butts up to a state forest. So the state actually kept up a decent gravel road going through the middle of the farm to this section of where his property, the owner's property, and the state forest joined. So we get down there, and we go up in there, and there's a lot of hollers, hills. This is heavily wooded, but there was a main creek that went down through the guy's property, and then you had a couple smaller creeks that would feed out of the hollers into it. So I mean, there was a lot of deer. He planted corn back in there, so there was deer, there was turkey, fox, obviously raccoons. It was prime habitat. So we get up in there and go to the back side of the property, and he let his dog out, and it wasn't long, and his dog got on a track. And his dog tracked it and everything, and, you know, the raccoon had went up a tree, so he heard his dog staying in one location just barking and barking. So we walked our way up, and sure enough, you know, the raccoon's up there. So he shined his light up on it, and I shot it out of the tree with my .22, and it hit the ground. We got it. And, of course, I mean, it was boom. It happened right now. So with all the ruckus that we made on that end, I said, let's drive on down a little bit, and we'll stop at another creek. And that's what we did. So we get down there. And this particular holler, as we were driving down, it was on our left, and there was a smaller cornfield of maybe 3 acres or so, and this creek came up out of that holler and fed into that the main creek that went through the middle of the property. And I had never been up that holler before, but I knew with the creek running through there the chances were probably good the dog was going to get on another track. So we let the dog out, and the dog got on another track, and the dog went up in that holler, and then after a while, the dog's bark got real muffled, and so he said, something ain't right, he shouldn't sound like that. All of a sudden the dog sounded even further away, and that shouldn't have been possible. So we went up through there, and going up that creek, the holler started, to open up a little bit. So the dog was on, as you're looking up in the holler, following the creek, the dog was up on the left. So we started up through there, and it was steep in there. When you first start going up in there, there's a lot of brush, a lot of big timber that really hadn't been timbered in there, at least nothing, recent. So we get up in there, and we'd probably go, 100 yards or so, somewhere through there. And we get closer to the dog, and we start hearing a little bit better. The dog's head, he was up to his shoulders in the end of a hollowed-out log. And what had happened, we theorized that this raccoon got up in or got through this log. The dog tracks him, and the raccoon went out the other side, and the dog's still thinking the raccoon's in there. And so he had been barking. So that's what made him sound so much further away. So we went ahead, and he put the leash on him. I thought, well, this is a bust, but there was a lot more property to hunt. And at this time, it was probably 11, 11:30, somewhere through there, by the time we got to this dog and everything else. So we started back the way we came. So now we're heading back out of the holler, and we're up on the one side of it. And as we're walking down through there, I stopped because, well, we both did, because I was in front of him, he was behind me, and had the dog in between us. And I looked over to our left, and there's this dark red, almost like a maroon ball of light. And from where we were over to the other side, I'm going to guess was 60 yards or so. And it was like a straight shot straight across from us on the other side of the holler. And that's something you don't expect. And at first, I think the first thing that popped into my mind is that another hunter? Because sometimes if you fox or coyote hunt, you'll use a light with a red lens on it. And I've done that. But this thing, probably at that distance, Wes, was about the size almost of a beach ball. So I knew it wasn't a light from somebody. And then my buddy is like, I'm like, what the hell is that? And he said he didn't know, and he's thinking it might be another hunter. And I said, I don't think so. I don't see nothing but the light. And this light was about 4 to 5 feet off the ground. So to kind of explain it a little bit better, there was no wind, and it was that time of the year, I'd say it was around 28, 32 degrees, 30 degrees, somewhere in there. So it's cold, and we are a long ways from anybody. I mean, there's really no town close. This is before really cell towers. It wasn't blinking. There's no houses up there. There's no roads up there. So it couldn't be like the brake lights from a vehicle or anything else, because as we looked over there, this thing gave off a light. It was quiet. I mean, I've heard other people talk about when things happen, it's quiet. It was quiet anyway. That dog had made such a ruckus that any other wildlife around there had probably either scattered or there wasn't hardly any noise, but it was quiet, so you couldn't hear anybody else walking on leaves. But you could see that thing floating, and it gave off a light around it, but it was a dark light, if that makes any sense. And it probably it had a radius of, I don't know, from that distance, maybe 6 or 8 feet around it. But here's the thing: you could see the ground lit up and trees behind it. So there was nobody there holding anything, nothing. So like I said, it's quiet, and we're staring, and my buddy said hello, and it was silent, nothing. And I'm thinking, okay, this is starting to freak me out, and it started freaking him out, and it started freaking the dog out, because you could hear the dog. You ever heard a dog when it's scared and it's doing that real low whimpering?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like hunkered, and it was whimpering, and it's like the dog did not want to be there. That freaked me out. I ain't gonna lie about that. It was a scary feeling, and the feeling was evil. I don't know how else to explain it. It wasn't a serene moment of, oh man, look at the light. It was, what is that? I can see out around it. It's red, and it was a dark red. But the center was lighter color, and the outer was more of a dark, not drastic. And like, I don't want to seem like the center was bright. It wasn't. It was just a lighter color. Not necessarily like a perfect sphere, but like a globe or something out there. But wasn't like that. Anyway, so we're standing there, and after he said hello, and there's no answer, I thought, well, okay, we gotta get out of here. So we started walking back down through the holler, and it stayed on the other side. It followed us, and by I mean followed us, it stayed on its side of the holler. But as we were moving, it stayed straight across from us. And so here we are, we're scared. The dog's trying to hang low to the ground, and it's pulling him. And I kept looking over and trying to look out in front of us, because the one thing I want to mention too, before we started heading back down towards the truck, this was back in 95, so you didn't have, at least we didn't at the time, these real powerful flashlights. So as we tried to shine light over on it after he said hello, the flashlights really didn't do much. But like I said, you could see around this thing. And that's when, we took the lights off of it, and we're like, we got to get out of here. So it stayed and probably followed us, I don't know, almost 50 yards straight across from us. And very slowly, as we were going, we were dropping back down. But I didn't want to drop down, and because of the terrain on our side, I didn't want to drop down too quick, because then we're going to be a lot closer to it if it kept following us. And that's what it felt like. And then the whole time I'm thinking, what in the world can it be? Because there's nobody around it. Because as it moved, like I said, you could see the ground behind it. You couldn't see through it. You could see the ground behind it, and you could see the trees behind it. And at that point, we're making noise with our own walking and getting out of there. And at least so, when we first saw it, it was just hovering there. It wasn't like going up and down. It was pretty much just still. So, and it had a real fluid motion as it was, but it never really deviated much in height as far as its relationship to the ground, from what I can remember. It still freaks me out to this day, really thinking about it, So I apologize.
No apologies. And so did you guys eventually just leave, or did it follow you all the way back?
It followed us for probably about another 50 yards, and what had happened, the way that the lay of the hillside was on that side of the holler, as we started down right close to where the holler opened up into the field, and as we descended, it stayed on its level. And that side of the holler had a lot more brush up on that side towards the entrance. And what eventually happened was we started feeling a little bit better because as we're descending, it's not. And it eventually pretty much like slowed and stopped. And then like the next turn or two of the head, it's gone. So I don't know if it went out. I don't know if it went on up and over on the other side. I don't know. But
it's very unnerving, isn't it, to see something like that?
It was very unnerving because I'm glad we weren't on the same side. I don't know what we would have done. The only thing we could have done was head straight down to the bottom. And even though I had just a 22 on me, what was I going to do with it's like a ball of light. There was, like I said, it made no sound. It didn't. I personally don't think it was like a swamp gas or anything else. For one, I've looked on the internet at other videos of balls. I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything like it. So I don't know. But we eventually, when it just went out, whether it went out or disappeared or whatever it did, we got back down into the field. And I mean, we made a beeline to the truck. He put that dog back up in the dog box in the back of the truck, and we got in the truck. And it's one of those things of, I hope this truck starts, and obviously it did. And we got out of there. And at first we're like, what in the world was that? He said, I don't know. And my buddy had been in the military. And he was a little bit older than me, and at that time, and he had been hunting his whole life, and he'd never seen nothing like it. So we had about another hour drive coming back up for me to drop him off, and we didn't say too much on the ride back. And then I dropped him off, and I went home. So I don't know. We didn't stop anywhere else that night, obviously. But it is unnerving, and like I said, it had an evil feel to it.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean with that. I mean, even in my own encounter, and I'm kind of glad that you came on the show to talk about this, Matt, because it goes back to my warning in my own encounter with the lights. Be careful, because the more interest you show in them, the more interest they'll show in you, and that's not what you want. And I know what you mean with the light, because the one I saw wasn't red, but it's very similar to what you're describing, how it's this weird ambient light all around it, on the trees around it, on the forest floor, and you can't really see through it, but it's not a blinding light by any means.
No,
it's a real odd, strange ball of light.
Yeah. Yeah, and the way it wasn't like someone had like a helium balloon on a string. You know how they'll bob and stuff?
Right.
It wasn't like that. It was very fluid, and it just had a bad feel to it. And as a side note to that, my nephew, who's a year younger than me, he also had permission to hunt that property. And a couple years ago, we were at a family dinner, and him and my niece's husband were talking because, we all hunt and stuff. And the subject of weird stuff, you see out in the woods came up, and I told him about this encounter. And my nephew said, it was on that farm? I'm like, yeah. I said, once you make that curve and you go up there, it's that first creek that comes out on, as you're going towards the state forest property, it comes out on your right. And I said it was right up that holler. He said, you know what? He said, I went to bow hunt up in there one day. It was one evening, and he said, I started to go up in there, and he said, I just got this weird feeling like I should not be in here. I said, are you kidding me? He said, no. He said, that was the same holler. So we compared notes. Now, he didn't see anything, but up in there, he had that feeling of he shouldn't be in there, and he wound up coming out of there. So I thought that was kind of interesting that, you know, he had even, and this had been, I was in 95, and we didn't, you know, it didn't come up in conversation between us until 2 years ago, basically. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
That is interesting. Let me ask you, what do you think that ball of light is?
Well, the guy that I went coon hunting with, who was there, we worked together and for about another 8-9 years in different parts of the company. So, I mean, every once in a while we'd talk about it, and even then he still didn't know, and I didn't know. And then I saw him a while back. We work in different companies, but in the same town now. And I ran into him, and, you know, we were asking each other about families and how everything had been going. And out of the blue, I said, you remember when we were out coon hunting and we saw that red light? He said, oh, yeah, I remember it. And we kind of compared some notes and what he remembered of and what I did. And I asked him, I said, after all this time, what do you think that was? And he looked at me and said, I don't know. He said, I don't know what that was. So to answer your question, if people who are listening to this might think I'm crazy, but I think it was something evil. I don't know if it was a spirit necessarily, but maybe it was. It was something evil. It just had that feeling of it's bad, and I don't know why it wasn't there when we went up. I do know that because we would have seen it at just a distance it was, and how that laid up in there, the land, we would have seen it. And I don't know, was it all the commotion that the dog made going up in there that, you know, was this thing up in there and it heard it and it, I don't know what you want to call it, manifest itself or whatever. But it was not there when we went up. And coming back, that's when we saw it. So I don't know if it was coming to check us out or what. I'm just glad that it was not on our side, because I don't know what would have happened. I don't know. I don't really think about it. I mean, we would have had to try to get away from it, but I had the feeling that this thing was going to come towards you. There was nothing that's going to stop it. And I don't believe it was extraterrestrial. I don't know why. I just get that feeling that it wasn't. I mean, not to say that it wasn't, but from what I've seen on other videos and stuff of people taking a video of lights, it just felt evil. And
yeah, I know what you mean when you say that, and I understand exactly where you're coming from on this whole thing, because I still have a hard time articulating it, like you're having a hard time articulating it.
Yeah,
it's like, what are you going to do? Shoot it? You can't shoot it. It's a ball of light. And then I can tell you from my own encounter with the light is there's curiosity at first when you first see it. You're like, what is that? You know, and there's this huge curiosity. But there is that moment, and I know what you mean when you say evil, and I can't articulate it either, but moments into seeing this thing and being fascinated with it, you start to feel like this isn't good. This whole situation isn't good. That thing isn't good. And it's hard. It's not like, you know, there's no sound. It's just a ball of light. You wouldn't think that would invoke feelings of evil, but it does. And there's this weird thing where it does invoke this thing to where you just kind of want to get away from it. and you don't really want to, you're no longer curious. The problem is when you become no longer curious and you start to leave, then it starts following you. And that's not only my encounter and your encounter, that's many people who've run into this ball of light, almost word for word say the same thing. And it just makes you wonder what it is. I was thinking spirit too, to be honest with you. I didn't think alien. I know people say they're drones down from alien. I don't believe any of that. My first thought was, well, not my first thought. After about 5 minutes of looking at this thing, I started thinking maybe that's demonic. Maybe that's more spiritual. Does not seem natural, like a natural occurring event.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. It was something that I almost felt like I shouldn't be seeing this. I shouldn't be seeing this. But there it is. If that makes any sense. Is it demonic? Was it a spirit of something? I mean, I didn't feel like it was a drone or anything like that. I mean, again, this was 95, so obviously there's no cell phones. Especially, we didn't have no cameras on us, no nothing. And even if we did, and I know people like, if I had a camera, I don't think you would have, because, I mean, I don't know, some might be fast on it and do it. But when you're out and you're just enjoying life and you're just having a good time, and then something like that stops you in your tracks, your brain almost can't comprehend it. You're thinking, what is that? What is it? And then when every second that ticks by that you can't figure out what it is, you get this feeling of, I shouldn't be seeing this. This something's not right. And then you just, all you're thinking about is getting away from it. And I personally, I've never went back up in there to do anything, even on the property. I haven't been back to that property. I was in November of 95. I haven't personally been back here since. And it was really good. I mean, it was really good, a really good hunting property. I mean, I took some deer off of there and squirrel and everything else. But I have no desire to see anything like that again. Now, it didn't stop me. It didn't stop me from going out. Now, I didn't coon hunt anymore after that, but I mean, I would go out at night, coyote hunting, fox hunting, stuff like that, and still go out early in the morning before daylight to bow hunt and turkey hunt and stuff. So, and I still went out in the woods by myself and everything else, but I never went in that area ever again. So I didn't let it stop me from being in the woods. But I don't know. I don't know what would have happened if it had been on our side. I mean, what if something like that gets close enough to you to touch you or I mean, what would happen? I mean, would it go right through you? Would it go around you? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what would happen if you hit one of those things. I've talked to a state trooper one time, and he almost hit one coming around a corner. And he was asking me what I thought the light was, and, he had the whole description of it. It was much bigger than what you and I saw. My own encounter and your encounter was completely different from what he saw. It was a lot larger, but same characteristics, the same type of light, the way it's an ambient light. It's almost like the light you would see from a crystal. It's that real radiant light around it, but it's not... Like you said, it's not a blinding light, but it makes you wonder. I don't know that I've ever talked to anyone that's actually touched one.
Well, there might be a reason for that,
Yeah, well, it's true.
But it makes me feel better, I mean, knowing that, especially you yourself, and that you've talked to others who've had something very similar, because it's real. Again, can I tell you exactly what it is? No, but in my circumstance, it was evil. That's the impression it left me with.
I would agree with you. But I appreciate you coming on and talking about the lights very much. There's not a lot of times people are willing to come on and talk about it, because what category do you put it in? You put it in aliens? Do you put it in Bigfoot? Do you put it in? And I almost think it's its own little category, because, people out looking for Bigfoot run into it. People are hiking, run into it. People are out coon hunting, run into it. You know, they see that weird light, and there's really no explanation for it.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird to say a light makes you feel like it was evil, but I know what you mean. I know for the audience listening, they will think that's an odd statement, but I completely get what you mean.
Yeah, and I think the caller kind of added to it, but quite honestly, Wes, it could have been pink, it could have been fluorescent purple. It wouldn't have mattered to me. It is still felt evil. It just it's not natural look. That's not something you see. So
yeah, definitely stay away from the lights. Don't chase them. I appreciate you coming on, Matt. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, Wes.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Check out the website, sasquatchchronicles.com. Until next time, everyone.
Someone is a human and right.